Smith from Dave Smith Instruments. We're here at the Reverb.com booth to talk synths for a bit with...
Hi, my name is Tats. I'm Chief Engineer of Analog Synthesizers at Korg. So I have some questions lined up. What were some of the unintended consequences of MIDI?
Unintended? Oh, I know. All of those horrible ringtones on cell phones. How about that? When we invented MIDI, we knew computers were going to be involved, but we had no idea there would be such a thing as a cell phone. They hadn't been invented yet. Nor did we know that there would be these really annoying general MIDI ringtones that would drive us crazy. But so, you know, there were billions of them out there, so that's pretty cool.
Did you think at the time that the standard would be around decades later?
I never looked 30 years into the future. I never looked 2 years in the future. So, no, we knew MIDI would catch on. There was no question about that. But 30 years later, 1.0, no, I didn't even cross my mind.
Right. Like, you know, people needed MIDI. People needed something like that, which is, you know, why it caught on. But you also have, like, a sensibility for creativity and, like, inspiring musicians. And where do you start? You know, do you think about the usability features, or do you think about the sound and, like, the creative process more? Or?
Well, thank you first. But yeah, the whole MIDI thing, I don't even think about. I'd rather be known as an instrument designer than somebody who happened to do MIDI. But well, as you know, the art of designing a musical instrument it's not one thing. You don't say this is the sound or this is the interface. It's the whole package together.
Right.
And you try to put in the personality to come up with something unique that sounds really good. I mean, obviously the sound is important, but it's a musical instrument, so it's the interaction.
Yeah.
So along the same lines, you know, how do you approach that?
All at the same time, I guess. I think you have to, like, you know, look at, you know, so many different things. You know, not just about, like, features and usability, the sound, costing, obviously. So I think you kind of have to kind of face up to it all at the same time. Otherwise, it doesn't come together, I think.
Right. How much do you think about the fun aspect of an instrument when you're designing?
The fun aspect?
Yeah, the fun
I
part.
think that's one of the most important things, you know.
Yes.
Fun in a variety of ways, actually. Fun in designing something new, for me, my own personal fun. And also, you know, the fun in using a synthesizer. It's just, you know, there's nothing quite like it. I made my first oscillator when I was about 15 or 16. And that was like my first kind of, you know, realization that you know, voltages, currents could manifest itself as sound. You know, that was like a moment of realization. And after that, you know, it was like, I have an oscillator, maybe I can change it with a filter, maybe I can modulate it with an LFO. And so I think that kind of step-by-step process still goes on today when I'm designing synthesizers. So I think it's, you know, it's a case of one thing leading to the next, and kind of, you know, trying to kind of navigate your way around and completing something that's fun to use. Yeah. What inspired you to start creating instruments?
In the first place? Well, it wasn't an overnight thing where one day I decided I was going to be an instrument designer. For me, it all started in 1972 when I found out there was such a thing as a Minimoog. I saw it in a store. I had heard about synthesizers but never actually saw one. And I saw it and I didn't know what it did, but I had to buy it. So I did buy it. And I actually still have it. It's in my office. All right. Which is pretty cool.
Were you a keyboard player at the time?
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
But after I bought it and started playing with it, I started making accessories for it. Then I started selling some of those accessories. And so at first I was building sequencers, things like that, not complete instruments. And it was over about 5 years between when I first got the Minimoog and then when I decided to build what became the Prophet 5. So that was my first real instrument, which was kind of a big jump going from 0 to a Prophet 5. Because I kind of did it all by myself. I laid out the circuit boards, designed the circuitry, wrote the software, you know, did a mechanical design. So I didn't really know what I was doing, but somehow made it all work. And of course, it came out pretty good, I think.
Yeah. Because you started with sequencers first.
Yes.
So why was it that you went into sequencers?
I always wanted one of those big Moog sequencers, but they cost too much. Just an analog, 3 rows of
Right.
16 knobs. So I just built my own.
Right. Because you wanted one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's kind of what it was the same with the Prophet 5. I designed what I wanted. And of course, the Prophet 5, people commented at the time that it looks more like a Mini Moog than it's, say, Art Odyssey, which was the other big synth at the time. And that's, of course, because that's what I was familiar with. So I designed and built what I wanted as a person who liked to play around with synthesizers. So is that the same for you? Do you find that you tend to design what you want?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, after building my first oscillator when I was a kid, the next thing was, I want a sequencer with a synth built in. So that was like my next thing. And then, I think there's an underlying kind of self, gratifying drive that makes me want to make instruments. My first kind of commercial synth was the Monotron, which was like a tiny little pocket-sized analog synth. And that was like a really personal project for me. And, at the time it was kind of under the radar. Analog wasn't a really big thing for Korg at the time.
Yeah, not quite. Yeah.
And, it was all kind of engineering and synthesis fun. And now it's become more of a thing. It's become more of a kind of defined category inside the company. So the challenge for me now actually is to keep that part of me which is kind of building for myself rather than for a market. And I think that's important to keep things interesting. Can I ask you something? Have you ever opened up one of my synths before and seen how it's been made?
I have not.
You have not? Okay.
I'm not very good at going around and opening other people's synths. I think we did have one in the office, a Minilogue at one point.
Okay.
So, but there's only so many ways to make these things if it's a real analog synth.
Right.
And I think you're probably doing similar things to what we are. I mean, the nice thing is these days you could use digital control, high-speed digital control of analog circuitry to make it work better and get lower costs than what we could do, for example, back in Prophet 5 days when I had only a Z80 to work with, and it was much more limited. So we can get the real analog sound and do so much more with it at a much better price and with a much more reliable product now than we used to be able to.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the biggest drivers for me, maybe this is a bit too geeky, is the because we use ARM core chips, and now you can get so much power for your money.
Yeah.
And so much high definition control of your analog circuitry. And that's been a big driver for me in designing synthesizers. How has kind of device, improvements in technology and changes in device, how's that affected your design process?
Oh, well, like I said, it's comparing it to a Prophet 5 or the earlier products where we had 8-bit microprocessors programmed in assembly language with 2 or 3 kilobytes of ROM for the whole operating system, compared to now where, of course, we use Sharks in our projects that are running really fast using floating point, and our control voltages are updated at audio rates, and you're doing the same thing, I'm sure. I'm sure you've seen our instruments. We've been doing it for a long time. It's just nice to be able to do that.
It's so liberating, I think, to have the freedom to do just interesting things,
Yeah, I mean, it's still a challenge. Prophet 6 has over 100 control voltages inside.
Right.
It's a lot to calculate and spin out at, like I said, at audio rates, but it's a fun challenge,
Yeah. My stuff has only been around for 6 years now, since the Monotron, so and I can't put my finger on a favorite track that it's been used on, but I have been working with Aphex Twin on our new synth, which is the Minilogue, and his programming, he's got about 30-40 presets that he made on that, and you know, it's been an amazing experience because he just goes so deep into, you know, I'd send him a prototype and the next day I'll have like, you know, 10, 15 emails about, you know, all the tiny details of the features. He'll just go through every single menu, try out every feature and option. If I had to put my finger on an artist that I've worked with, that is, you know, that is kind of, I guess, my favorite, it's got to be Aphex Twin and the stuff he made on the Monologue.
I can't go with favorites because there are so many of them. I mean, especially if you go back to Prophet 5 days, because the Prophet 5 was just on everything back then. There are so many great, huge hits that have the Prophet 5 on it. And now even, you know, what's really cool about synthesis this time around is everybody's using it. It's not, you know, a lot of people think, oh, synthesizers are popular because of EDM. Well, yes, partially, but, you know, Taylor Swift plays Prophet 12 in her concerts. You know, Alicia Keys plays them. And the Black Keys, people who you don't think of as synth artists. And this is along with the normal synth people like, you know, Nine Inch Nails, Radiohead, Arcade Fire. You know, those people you kind of expect it. But what's really cool is seeing it stretch out beyond the normal boundaries of what you would think about for synthesizers. Synthesizers have grown significantly just in the last few years. I kind of point to, in 2002, I came out with the Evolver, and same year, Moog came out with the Voyager. And I think that was kind of the start of a very slow start of the analog coming back in. And it took, you know, 10 years until it became more popular. And now, of course, we have a full line of polyphonic analog synths, and you know, Korg has an analog synth, 4-voice, and you know, other people are starting to do it. So the difference is this time around, people are actually playing synths, analog synths, because they are analog synths. Yeah, whereas in the late 70s, early 80s, people were playing Prophet 5s and Oberheims because they were the best emulative synth at the time. Because this was before sample keyboards, sample pay-by keyboards. But once the M1 came out from Korg and other digital sampler romplers came out, we went into what I call the digital dark ages. Right. Because everybody was happy. They had their pianos and their horns and their strings, and they didn't really want synthesizers all that much. Right. This time around, people really want synthesizers. Yep. And the basic analog subtractive synthesis model has actually passed the test of time now. It's been around for 50 years. Everybody knows what the cutoff knob does, what the resonance knob does. It's very simple conceptually, and yet it's very powerful. And I think it's going to be around forever now.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that people choose analog out of so many different types of synthesis. Yes. And I think there's something, you know, there's something quite magical about kind of turning a knob and kind of, you know, detuning an oscillator, feeling the phasing, or like just, you know, like just inching up the cutoff. And I think that is so in tune with creating music, with kind of expressing yourself with sound.
You're a musician, you have a real musical instrument in front of you, you turn a knob and it takes you somewhere musically. And you just can't get that on software. It's just not the same thing. Software certainly has its place in the musical world. Yep. But if you're interacting as a musician with a musical instrument, I don't think you could beat an analog synth, really.
A few years ago, it was said that like analog was the new thing, but I think it's gonna stick around. It's stood the test of time. It's, you know, it's another type of synthesis that people will always appreciate.
At least we hope so, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.